in honor of the live action Snow White movie coming out, I wanted to revisit the original. I hadn't watched it since I was a kid and just see what I thought about it and what would make the live action good. About a week from now, we'll probably end up talking about how the live action ruined the story, because that's what most movies do now. Be nice if it was good, though. I thought the original Snow White was pretty good overall, but really thin in some areas. I think the bones of the story or the structure obviously stand the test of time. That's why there can be a remake. I think it could definitely be fleshed out in certain areas. And in an ideal world, the live action would do this in a way that's respectful to the original and promotes the same morality while adding to it and not just being a shitty copy paste. The roots of the story still work really well, although I can see why feminists would not like it. Although to be fair, they're pretty miserable as a group and don't like anything. Just the simple idea of vanity and jealousy making you unattractive are morals that still hold up today. They probably will forever. The idea of humility versus hubris, and the idea of a loyal group of friends overcoming the individual selfish person, even though they're more powerful, just promoting general kindness, because that's what wins over both the huntsman and the dwarves to help Snow White. And obviously, at the end of the day, the power of true love conquering all. A little bit cheesy, but not a bad romantic message. Obviously, everyone's already familiar with the movie and all of its themes. I mainly want to focus on what areas I think could be improved, and also just some of the things I thought were strange in the movie. And I would say that out of all the dwarves, Grumpy is my spirit animal. Depending on how uncharitable you want to be about the messaging, I think I could see why the feminists would hate it, as the idea of what makes the queen not the fairest one of all is her getting older. Obviously, Snow White's entire goal and ambition is just to find her true love and to be with the prince. It makes her seem kind of shallow since we don't even learn the prince's name. So I definitely think there's issues in there, even though the story as a whole, I think, still holds up. The music should probably not be touched. A lot of it is classic. I'm sure everyone knows the hi ho, off to work we go song. I do think it's a little bit funny that we have maybe the happiest miners ever, except for the miners hanging out with Drake and R. Kelly, of course. But I imagine that they'll keep the tone the same in the live action version for that and won't try to turn this into some sort of commentary on laboring and God knows what else. So I'm both looking forward to the live action and dreading it. I guess we'll see what we get for over $300 million. But I really just want to talk about the movies and some of the things that I think are kind of weird or maybe don't hold up as well, and what I think could be improved on relatively easily while also keeping the core of the story. I think the most obvious thing is the relationship between both Snow White and the Queen and Snow White and the Prince, and possibly even Snow White and the Huntsman. In the animated movie, the Queen is just pretty much the caricature of vanity and evilness, and Snow White is the embodiment of being kind and humble. And I think you can keep those core traits, but make their relationship a little bit more interesting. There's been a million versions of this movie. I'm sure in one of them, the Queen is in love with the Prince, but he wants to go for Snow White. But really, you have unlimited options with what you can do with their relationship. Obviously, you don't want to go too heavy, as your target demographic is children. You could always do a thing where you see the Queen raise Snow White, trying to mold her into something that she wants her to be when Snow White doesn't want to be that. You could do the thing where the Queen didn't really have power, but then as she accumulated more, she became more obsessed over time. I think you can do the romance angle, but it seems weird to me because you kind of have to turn the Queen into a cougar, given modern day sensibilities. If you put the prince at an age between Snow White and the Queen, people would probably call him a groomer. You could combine them where Snow White and the prince are falling in love, and it's changing Snow White in ways the Queen doesn't like. So she tries to exile the prince or get rid of him or whatever, and Snow White finds out and runs away. There's really unlimited options for what you can do here to kind of establish the characters a bit before the plot really gets going. The original movie is only like an hour and 15 to 20 minutes if you don't include the opening and credits on each end. So you can easily add half an hour to the movie without making it feel like a slog to get through. I think the dynamic between Snow White and the dwarves is really weird in the original, because you end up in a situation where she essentially breaks and enters into their home. 10 minutes later, she's telling them no dinner until they wash up and kind of laying down the law. Of course, that was an era much more where women ran the household and men did the work. So that's just how shit goes. I still think the idea of just having her break and enter is kind of a weird one. And you could probably do the thing where they run into each other outside the home and the dwarves just being generally kind and Snow White being as sensitive and nice as she is what wins them over to invite her in. instead of her just kind of doing her own thing and being like, oh, it's a bunch of orphans. Oh, I'll just take this shit over and become the mommy. I thought the way the queen died in the original, while kind of dark with the vultures circling, was okay, because you're in kind of a tough spot with a kids movie where you clearly want the evil queen to die, but you don't want your protagonist to kill somebody. I wouldn't be surprised at all if in the new one they go with more of a thing where the dwarves and Snow White team up to get her arrested or something, because I can't imagine that she'll be rescued by the prince's kiss. But I wouldn't mind at all a situation where we see the prince and Snow White's relationship. He's grieving and looking for her for a long time before he finds her. And then when he comes across the dwarves and she's been poisoned, they work together to overcome the queen's evil with the power of friendship and blah, blah, blah. I think you could definitely make that kind of thing work. Even though you don't really need to, maybe just for even a more exciting climax. Since kids growing up nowadays are growing up on iPads and TikTok, you might want a bit more of an exciting ending. I think a neat way to do the stakes also to make there be a little bit more tension might be to have the prince pursuing, looking for Snow White, and the queen also looking for Snow White. So you kind of get your countdown timer tension where there's a race to find Snow White first so the prince can protect her. Obviously, he would fail. That's your low point. He finds Snow White unconscious, blah, blah, blah. But I do think it's a bit weird in the old one, too, where they don't want to bury her. So she's in this glass coffin for months. And if you want to be uncharitable, you could take the message away of not letting go of someone you've lost is the right thing to do, because they are rewarded for it in the end when Snow White comes back to life and they return to the castle and she gets the prince. So I think you could get rid of that whole dynamic and have a lot more tension if the nameless prince and evil queen are racing for Snow White and he loses the race. If you really want to, you could even expand on it and have him trying to decide between revenge and getting back at the queen or trying to get Snow White back. And then you have him go after Snow White. He doesn't choose the path of revenge. He's rewarded for his efforts and they arrest the queen at the end or whatever. Justice is served. Hurrah. But unfortunately, I suspect what we get will just be Snow White saving herself and whatever. I mainly just wanted to talk about it because it's a classic. It's kind of what made Disney Disney. And it'd be really nice if the movie was good. Although it's really hard to be optimistic in general right now when it comes to movies and TV. If you've seen the movie recently, let me know what you think. Are there things that you think could be improved? Are there things that you think should be taken out completely? Try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.